Consumer demand growing, factories struggling to keep up, and a shortage of workers from the ports to truck drivers. There is little relief in sight. Backlogged, empty containers contributing to a shortage around the world, dramatically increasing the cost of shipping.
Stock signs are back on the store shelves as Americans face a supply chain crisis.
You see, a worldwide shortage of one type of computer chip is wreaking havoc on the automotive supply chain.
Before COVID, most people knew little about the supply chain or international trade. As long as products were on the shelf at a price we could pay, we usually didn't question it. But because the supply chain is no longer working, debates on protectionism versus free trade policies are now back on the hot seat.
Any country that devalues their currency in order to take unfair advantage of the United States, which is many countries, will be met with sharply. And that includes tariffs and taxes.
Instead of beating up on our friends and coddling our enemies, we make up 25% of the world's economy. We should get the other 35 to 40% of the world to join us in setting the rules of the road, requiring China to have to engage in fair trade.
There's pros and cons of each, and just like many economic theories, there's gray area. Remember, any policy decision is destined to help some and hurt others. Rarely mentioned, however, are the consequences trade has had on American values. Due to the initial advantages of America being geographically isolated and resource-rich, on top of the cultural diversity and optimism of the first settlers, Americans' confidence and independence grew unparalleled to any nation's history. Innovations in industry power, especially in the auto industry, led to Americans being seen as hardworking, just as much of a stereotype as baseball and apple pie. Patriotism became synonymous with working long hours and spending more each year to achieve the American dream. However, for decades, the service sector has increased while manufacturing has decreased. Technology advances, comparative advantage, environmental regulations, dependence on foreign minerals, and military alliances are a few factors that have led us to relying on other countries. It's not a question of which policies to implement, their effects or inevitability, but to see how modern growth necessitates dependency. This is why the U.S. is facing an identity crisis.
It's much less clear what one is becoming when one becomes an American citizen.
You sort of talk about it as creating a mass identity crisis. Well, we're the most prosperous people in human history. We're also kind of floundering, kind of lost, don't know who we are.
We don't know who we are because the identities that cultures used to provide are now missing for most people.
Our sense of patriotism, which was based on independence, is no longer practical. Some arguments for protectionism and reshoring, therefore, seem like stray nostalgia to bring back the old America. To continue to grow not just economically, but socially and morally, we have to be open to the world. We must collectively decide on new priorities. Who will Americans be and where will we find pride? How will American patriotism be defined in the future?
By and large, when people look for sources of identity, what's left is products, what's left is advertising, what's left is entertainers to help you decide who you are and how you want to live your life.
Our culture, our ethnic roots sort of help define expectations for us, limitations for us, and in the absence of those, where do people find their boundaries?
That's the problem. That is the essential dilemma of post-culturalism, whereby people have to make all of these choices for themselves.